People like you cannot afford to breathe the air in here. Get out before I call the police." The words sliced through the glossy quiet of the luxury boutique like broken glass. A woman in her late 60s stood at the center of the storm, dressed in a navy cardigan and carrying a small leather bag. Two security guards held her arms as if she were a criminal. The sales associate leaned forward, voice sharp, finger almost touching her face. Around them, shoppers froze. Phones lifted. The glitter of diamonds behind the glass cases seemed dim compared to the raw sting of prejudice hanging heavy in the air. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we are glad you are here. Now, back to the woman in the navy cardigan. Her name, for now, was just Ma'am. That was all the staff allowed her to be. She had walked in alone, quiet, deliberate, looking for a necklace for her granddaughter's graduation. No entourage, no designer logos to announce her worth. Just calm eyes that had seen this performance before. The associate never asked her name. She only looked her up and down, decided she did not belong, and raised her voice so the entire showroom would hear. The guards tightened their grip. One muttered, "Standard procedure, ma'am. Cooperate." But his tone carried no respect, only assumption. To the crowd, it looked like theft prevention. To her, it was déjà vu. She remembered 20 years earlier when a hotel clerk had told her, "This lobby is not for you." Same words, different walls, same cut of humiliation. A young woman near the jewelry counter whispered, "She was only looking at the display." Another guest, phone shaking in his hand, whispered to his friend, "This is wrong. She is not doing anything." The murmurs built, the atmosphere charged. The associate smirked and raised her voice higher. "This is a luxury brand. We protect it from people who come in here pretending to shop. She is wasting everyone's time." The words carried across the chandelier-lit room, heavy with accusation. A few customers shifted uncomfortably, torn between disbelief and fear of speaking out. And still, the woman in the navy cardigan did not flinch. She stood anchored, arms pinned, yet unbroken. Her silence was not weakness. It was patience. It was the sound of dignity refusing to bow. The grip of the security guards did not loosen. Their hands pressed against her arms with the kind of force reserved for real criminals, not for a woman who had quietly walked in to buy a necklace. One of them leaned close and muttered, "You should make this easy. Walk out." His voice carried no compassion, only contempt dressed as authority. The shoppers around them shifted, uncertain whether to watch or to intervene. The air inside the boutique was no longer sparkling. It was heavy, tense, as if every chandelier light was a spotlight on humiliation. The sales associate crossed her arms and smirked. She is clearly stalling. People like her come in with fake cards, hoping we will not notice. Well, we notice. Always. Her voice dripped with satisfaction, loud enough to carry across the polished glass counters. She gestured toward the handbag dangling from the woman's shoulder. "Check it, now." The taller guard yanked the bag free without asking. The leather strap slipped from her shoulder and snapped against her cardigan. Gasps rose from the crowd. A middle-aged man whispered, "That is theft. They cannot do that." But the associate barked, "Quiet. This is company policy." She nodded toward the guard who was already unzipping the bag. Inside were only the ordinary items of a grandmother: a folded grocery list, a set of keys, a worn wallet with family photographs tucked inside. The guard held up the wallet as if it were evidence. "Suspicious," he muttered, even though nothing inside was suspicious at all. The associate leaned in, squinting, then shook her head in mock pity. Pathetic attempt. The woman in the navy cardigan still did not raise her voice. Her eyes were steady, her breathing even. To the casual observer, she looked subdued. But to anyone who had felt the sting of injustice, she looked like a storm contained, waiting for the exact second to break. Across the showroom, a young woman clutching a shopping bag whispered to her friend, "She has done nothing. Why are they humiliating her like this?" Her friend, phone already recording, replied, "Because they think they can. Look at her clothes. They judged her before she even spoke." The boutique manager appeared then, a man in a tailored suit with a practiced smile that did not reach his eyes. He stepped forward with an air of false authority, scanning the crowd before landing his gaze on the restrained woman. "Release her," he scoffed. Absolutely not. This is a thief playing dress-up. I will not have my store's reputation dragged through the mud. He reached to the counter and grabbed a folded slip of paper, the receipt from her earlier reservation. Without hesitation, he tore it in half and let the pieces flutter to the marble floor like scraps of dignity. There, no proof left. Escort her out. The smaller guard shifted uncomfortably, his grip faltering for just a second as he watched the receipt fall. But the associate's smirk widened. Perfect. Now she has nothing. The room erupted in whispers. Some shoppers gasped. A man near the watch display muttered, "This is outrageous." A young woman near the back held her phone higher, whispering into the camera, "They just ripped up her receipt. This is happening in real time." And still, the woman in the navy cardigan stood rooted, calm in posture, eyes locked on the manager. She did not plead. She did not argue. Her silence was louder than their insults. Then, with deliberate calm, she spoke at last. Her voice was low, even, and steady, cutting through the clamor like steel through fabric. "You will regret this." "Oh," the associate laughed sharply. "Regret? Do not make me laugh. You are done here. Security, drag her out." But in the corner, a teenager whispered to his mother, "She is not afraid. Look at her face. Something is coming." And something was indeed coming. The storm was not in their voices. It was in her silence. The order rang out sharp. "Drag her out." The associate's words cracked through the boutique like a whip. The taller guard tightened his grip, pulling her arm hard enough to draw another gasp from the crowd. The smaller guard hesitated, his eyes darting to the phones now raised high, recording every second. The manager waved a hand dismissively, as though silencing a fly. "Do not mind the cameras. Let them film. This woman will be exposed for the fraud she islanded." His voice carried smug certainty, but his posture betrayed unease. A bead of sweat formed at his temple. The woman in the navy cardigan did not move. She stood as if planted in the marble itself, rooted in dignity. Her silence unnerved them more than any protest could have. A voice from the corner broke the tension. "This is wrong," a young man said, his phone recording steady. He wore a faded hoodie, his face pale with anger. "She showed you her receipt. You tore it up. That is not policy. That is discrimination." The manager turned sharply, face flushed. "You do not understand our procedures. She is lying. She is trespassing." His words thundered, but the conviction in them faltered. The woman finally lifted her head, her gaze steady as iron. She spoke softly, yet her voice carried across the room. "Do you call every guest a thief, or only the ones who look like me?" The air thickened. The smaller guard shifted again, releasing part of his grip. The taller guard barked, "Do not listen to her. Orders are orders." But even he could feel the weight of the eyes on him, the judgment of the room pressing in. Near the jewelry case, a mother clutching her daughter's hand raised her own voice. "She has not stolen anything. I saw her come in. She only asked to see the display. This is shameful," her daughter whispered. "Why are they doing this to her?" The mother's answer came in a whisper sharp with pain. "Because they think she does not belong." The manager straightened his tie, trying to reclaim authority. "Enough of this performance. Call the police." The associate grabbed the store's landline, her fingers trembling slightly as she dialed. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "The police? For what?" someone asked. Another voice added, "She has not done a thing." The panic began to turn into outrage. The woman remained still, calm, unflinching. She remembered another moment years earlier, when she was 24 and her bank account had been frozen because a clerk did not believe her check was real. She had waited in silence then, too. She had learned that silence unsettles oppressors more than shouting ever could. The guard holding her bag tossed it onto the counter with a thud. He opened every pocket, scattering personal items across the glass surface. Keys clattered. Photographs slid face up, showing the smiling faces of children and grandchildren. A hush fell as one photo landed near the edge of the counter. A small girl in a graduation gown. The associate sneered. "Props, nothing more." But her voice wavered for the first time. The woman lifted her chin. "That child is real. That family is real. And the way you are treating me now will be remembered just as clearly as her smile." The smaller guard stepped back fully, releasing her arm. I do not think this is right." His words carried across the room, quiet but undeniable. The manager snapped, his mask slipping. "You work for me, not for her. Do as you are told." But the room had shifted. Phones were still raised. Shoppers murmured. The mother near the jewelry case shouted again, "She deserves respect. You are humiliating her because of her skin, nothing more." The taller guard pulled harder, trying to move her toward the door. Yet even with the force, she did not stumble. She stood, grounded, her voice calm as she repeated the same words. "You will regret this." And for the first time, the manager looked uncertain, not because of her threat, but because of the silence that followed. Silence that felt less like defeat and more like judgment waiting to fall. The police had not yet arrived, but the sound of the associate's voice on the phone made the entire boutique feel like a courtroom. "Yes, we have a trespasser," she said loudly, her words chosen to poison the air. "Suspicious activity. Possible theft." She looked around as she spoke, making sure every shopper heard. Every syllable was an accusation, not a fact. The woman in the navy cardigan did not flinch. Her arms were no longer pinned, but she did not move toward the door. She remained anchored in place, her presence heavier than the chandeliers above. Her silence was not fear, it was strategy. A teenage boy near the perfume counter raised his phone higher, whispering into his live stream. "She has done nothing. They are calling the police on her just for existing. Look at this." Comments flooded across his screen, disbelief turning to fury. The manager tried to reassert control. He straightened his tie and spoke to the crowd. "This is exactly why we must be strict. People come in here to take advantage. If we let her stay, we encourage more of this behavior." His tone was crisp, but the cracks were showing. His eyes darted toward the phones. His smile was brittle. Then the woman spoke, her voice steady even, each word carrying the weight of years. "I walked in here with respect. You answered with humiliation. That is the theft, not me." The room stilled. The smaller guard, who had already let go of her arm, lowered his gaze. He muttered softly, "She is right." The taller guard shot him a look, but even his grip seemed weaker than before. Near the front, a young woman with short, dark hair finally spoke louder. "I am an attorney, and what you are doing is unlawful. You destroyed her receipt. You searched her bag without consent. You are detaining her without cause. Every second of this is evidence against you." She turned toward her phone, recording steadily. "And now the world is watching." The associate slammed the receiver back into place, ending her call to the police, her face flushed with anger. "You do not scare us." "This is protocol. She is a liar." The attorney shook her head. "Protocol is not an excuse for prejudice." The woman in the navy cardigan lifted her chin slightly. For the first time, a spark of motion. She reached calmly into her pocket and pulled out her phone. With one quiet tap, she raised it to her ear. On the other end, a voice answered instantly. "We are ready, ma'am." It was calm, professional, certain. The sound carried just enough for the nearest shoppers to hear. The manager scoffed, but his voice cracked. "Who are you calling? No one is going to save you." Her reply was soft, but sharp as glass. "I do not need saving. I need witnesses, and I already have them." A hush followed. Dozens of eyes locked on her, not with pity, but with anticipation. Something unseen had shifted. She was no longer just a target of humiliation. She was a figure of control, deliberate and unshaken. The taller guard stepped back half a pace, uncertain for the first time. His partner whispered, "What if she is somebody?" The manager snapped, "She is nobody. Look at her. Nobody important dresses like that." His words came out too loud, too forced. The crowd caught the desperation in his tone. The woman lowered her phone slowly, her eyes never leaving the manager. "You see fabric, you see color, but you do not see truth, and truth is heavier than all of your chandeliers combined." Gasps spread like sparks catching dry wood. Phones tilted closer. The weight of the room had flipped. She was no longer the one on trial. The boutique itself was. And the storm was only beginning. The silence in the boutique was broken by a voice trembling but firm. It came from a young employee who had been standing by the cash register the entire time, frozen between duty and conscience. She was no older than 23, with a name tag that read, Elena. Her hands shook as she spoke, but her words carried farther than anyone expected. "I saw her name in the system this morning. She had a reservation. It was valid." The manager's head snapped around, his face pale with fury. "Elena, not another word." His command cracked like a whip, but the damage was already done. The crowd had heard. The tension in the room swelled. The woman in the navy cardigan turned her head slightly, her gaze softening just for a moment as her eyes met Elena's. There was no smile, only recognition, a silent acknowledgement of courage found at the right time. The associate hissed through clenched teeth. Lies! She is trying to protect her. She jabbed a finger toward Elena. Do not listen to her. She is new. She does not understand policy. But another voice joined in, this time from a guest near the display cases. A man in a gray suit raised his phone and said loudly, I heard the manager order the receipt destroyed. That was not her fault. That was his. His statement rippled across the boutique like a verdict delivered. The manager's composure cracked. His polished smile collapsed into a sneer. Enough! You all think you know better than me? This store is my responsibility. If I say she is a fraud, she is a fraud. The woman finally stepped forward, no longer confined by the guard's grip. Her voice rose just enough to command the space. You are wrong. Your words may fill this room, but they cannot erase the truth. The truth is here. It is in the system. It is in the receipt you tore. It is in every witness who just spoke. The shoppers murmured louder. Phones were lifted higher. What had begun as whispers was now a wave of voices. She is right. They treated her like a criminal. This is discrimination. The taller guard stepped back fully now, shaking his head. I am not part of this. I cannot be. His retreat made the manager stumble, his authority unraveling in front of everyone. The associate tried to salvage control, but her voice wavered. She is manipulating all of you. Do not fall for it. Yet even she avoided meeting the woman's eyes. The woman's phone buzzed softly in her hand. She lifted it to her ear. The voice on the line was calm, resolute. Protocol is active. Every word spoken in the last 5 minutes has been recorded and logged. Do you want me to escalate? Her answer was quiet but clear. Yes, escalate. Gasps echoed through the boutique. The crowd sensed a shift they could not fully understand but could feel deep in their bones. This was no ordinary customer. The manager's face drained of color, but he forced another laugh, brittle and thin. You think calling someone will save you? Who could you possibly know that matters in here? The woman lowered her phone and looked directly at him, her voice like steel. It is not about who I know. It is about who I am. The room froze. Elena's eyes widened. Shoppers stopped whispering and simply stared, waiting for the revelation that hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to break. And though she had not yet revealed the full truth, the balance of power had already begun to shift. The boutique, once a stage for her humiliation, was now the stage for their reckoning. The crowd's energy thickened as though the walls themselves were leaning closer to hear. Every phone stayed raised, every eye fixed on the confrontation. The woman in the navy cardigan stood calm, her presence unshaken, while the manager's voice grew more frantic. You are all being fooled, he shouted, his tie now crooked from his own nervous tugs. She is nothing but a con artist. People like her walk in off the street pretending to have money, pretending to belong. We have a responsibility to protect this brand from people like that. His words rang sharp, but instead of conviction, they carried the sour taste of desperation. The associate chimed in, emboldened by his panic. Exactly. Look at her clothes. No real client dresses like that. No one with money would dare to walk in here looking so ordinary. She spat the last word with contempt, as though it were the worst insult she could conjure. Gasps spread across the boutique. The insult was not subtle. It was direct, cutting, and everyone knew what it meant. A man near the watch counter muttered, They are not even hiding it. This is about race. This is about what they think she looks like. The woman lifted her chin. She spoke with deliberate calm, her words steady, her tone unflinching. You judged me the moment I walked in. Not because of policy, not because of evidence, because of what you see when you look at me. And that truth will be the weight that breaks you. Elena, still near the register, stepped forward despite her trembling hands. She is telling the truth, she said louder than before. I checked her reservation myself. It was real. She is not lying. The manager turned on her, eyes blazing. You are finished here, Elena. Pack your things. You are fired. But before Elena could even react, another voice rose. A customer in a blue blazer pointed his phone toward the manager. You just fired her for telling the truth, and it is on video. Do you really think anyone will believe you after this? His words carried the weight of the crowd, and murmurs of agreement swelled. The manager's polished composure had shattered. His gestures were sharp, his tone uneven. "You do not run this store. I do, and I decide who belongs here." The woman's voice cut through him like steel. "Then you have already decided your own downfall, because belonging is not yours to grant. It is mine to define." The associate scoffed, raising her voice higher as though noise could disguise guilt. "Enough of this drama. She is nothing but a thief in disguise. Call the police again. Have her dragged out." But the crowd no longer believed her. A woman near the handbags shouted, "Stop lying! She has done nothing." Another added, "We are watching. We are not leaving until she gets justice." The woman in the navy cardigan raised her phone once more, her calm presence commanding the room. On the other end, the voice of her assistant returned, steady and clear. "Escalation confirmed. All security feeds from this boutique have been pulled and archived. Every biased statement has been logged against staff IDs. The board will be notified within the hour." The manager's face turned ashen. He glanced around the room, realizing the tide had shifted completely. His authority, once absolute, now hung by a thread. And the woman stood silently at the center of it all. No longer the target of suspicion, but the embodiment of truth. Her silence heavier than their shouts, her calm louder than their accusations. The storm had gathered, and its first strike was about to fall. The storm broke in the form of one final insult. The manager, cornered by truth and surrounded by witnesses, slammed his hand on the glass counter and barked, "You are a fraud! You do not belong here! People like you steal, you do not shop. You disgust me." His words echoed in the boutique like a gavel of prejudice, so loud that even the shoppers in the farthest corner heard every syllable. The taller guard, who still hovered uncertainly, looked down at the floor. His jaw tightened. He was trained to follow orders, but something in the cruelty of the manager's voice made his grip falter again. The smaller guard had already stepped away, refusing to participate any longer. The associate seized the moment to strike deeper. She reached across the counter, grabbed the woman's handbag again, and ripped open another pocket. Items spilled out across the marble floor: an old notebook, a pen, a folded photo of her family. The photo slid to the feet of a young girl standing with her mother. The girl bent down, picked it up, and whispered, "She is a grandmother." The associate sneered, "Props, all of it fake." Then, with deliberate cruelty, she crumpled the photo in her fist and tossed it aside. Gasps filled the boutique like thunder. The mother of the little girl raised her voice, shaking with outrage. "Enough! You are humiliating her in front of children. Do you not see what you are teaching them? That cruelty is policy?" The manager, red-faced and desperate, shouted louder, "This is my store. I will decide who stays and who leaves." His tone was no longer confident. It was desperate, as though he could bully the truth into silence. The woman finally moved. She bent down, picked up the crumpled photo, and smoothed it gently with her fingers. Then she stood tall, her posture regal, her voice unwavering. "You tore up my receipt. You rifled through my bag. You destroyed a photograph of my family. And still, I am standing here, calm. Why do you think that is?" The words struck the air with the weight of a verdict. Silence followed, so heavy it seemed to press against the glass cases and polished floors. Then, slowly, a customer near the watch display clapped once. The sound was sharp, defiant. Another joined. Then another. Soon the boutique was filled with the sound of applause, not for the staff, not for the store, but for the woman who refused to break. The manager's face drained of color. "Stop this!" he shouted, but the clapping only grew louder, joined by cheers. Phones caught every second, red recording lights glowing like silent witnesses. The associate backed away, her confidence crumbling. The taller guard lowered his hands completely, stepping aside. Only the manager stood firm, trembling with rage and fear. He pointed at the woman and screamed, "Call the police again! Get her arrested now!" But his words no longer carried power. They carried panic. And everyone in the room could hear the difference. The woman looked directly at him, her eyes unblinking, her voice as steady as the earth itself. "You just made the gravest mistake of your career, not because I will shout, not because I will fight, but because you dared to tell the wrong woman that she does not belong." And with those words, the tide turned completely. The boutique no longer belonged to the manager, it belonged to her, and everyone in the room knew it. The boutique buzzed with a tension so sharp it felt like static in the air. The manager stood rigid behind the counter, red-faced, his voice trembling with rage. The associate hovered at his side, her earlier smirk replaced with a pale unease. The guards no longer touched the woman. They had stepped back, unwilling to carry the weight of his orders any longer. The woman in the navy cardigan raised her phone again, pressing it gently to her ear. Her voice was calm, measured, but the words carried like thunder. Initiate full protocol. Confirm identity verification. On the other end, her assistant's voice rang through the quiet boutique, amplified just enough by the speaker. Confirmed. Cross-check complete. Your reservation is flagged under executive clearance. Video and audio recordings are already stored on secure servers. Would you like to escalate authorization? The crowd gasped. The murmurs grew louder. Shoppers leaned closer, some whispering to one another. Executive clearance? What does that mean? The manager slammed his hand down again, desperate to reassert control. Do not listen to her. This is a con. She has tricked the system. She is pretending to be someone important. Oh. But his words were brittle. They did not land as they had before. The crowd's eyes were no longer on him. They were fixed on her. The woman lowered the phone slightly and let her words cut clean through the noise. You claim I am pretending. Then let us see what the system says. The assistant's voice came again, crisp and undeniable. Identity match confirmed. You are logged as a senior stakeholder and verified owner representative of this brand. Authority level. Maximum. Oh. The room erupted in gasps. A young man near the back whispered into his live stream. She owns it. She actually owns it. The comment feed on his screen exploded, disbelief and excitement flooding the chat. Elena, the young employee who had spoken earlier, looked as though the weight of vindication had lifted from her chest. I knew it, she whispered, her eyes glistening. I knew she was not lying. The associate stumbled back a step, stammering. That cannot be true. She does not look. She stopped herself, but the damage was done. The crowd heard the word she nearly said. The prejudice had never been subtle, but now it stood naked in the air. The woman in the navy cardigan turned her gaze directly on her. Finish the sentence. Say it clearly. Say what you meant. The associate's mouth opened, but no words came out. Her silence was louder than any insult. The manager tried to seize the reins once more, his voice cracking. This does not change anything. She is not welcome in my store. The woman stepped forward, closing the space between them, her presence like a tide rising. That is where you are wrong. This store is mine. Every case, every chandelier, every lock on every door belongs to me, and you just tried to throw me out of what I own. The boutique went silent, the weight of her revelation crashing down like a wave. The authority in her voice was not theatrical. It was absolute. A shopper near the front, still holding her phone high, whispered in awe. She just said it. She owns this place. Another shopper added, he tried to humiliate his own boss. The woman raised her phone one final time. Her words were steady, calm, and deliberate. Proceed to next step. Record this moment. Begin immediate suspension of all staff involved. The assistant's voice replied, Understood. Suspension confirmed. All staff IDs flagged red. Effective immediately. Ugh. The manager's face drained of blood. His access badge buzzed against his chest pocket, a faint beep signaling its deactivation. The associate's phone went dark as her system privileges vanished in real time. Both of them looked down, stunned, as though the ground had just shifted beneath their feet. And in that moment, the boutique did not belong to them anymore. It belonged to the woman they had tried so hard to erase. The color drained from the manager's face as the beep of his badge echoed like a funeral bell. He tapped it against the register screen, once, then twice, as if sheer willpower could force it back to life. Nothing. The screen blinked red. His access was gone. The associate fumbled with her own device. It, too, displayed a single word. Revoked. Her mouth hung open, shock frozen in place. The power she had clung to moments ago had evaporated in front of the very customers she had tried to impress. Gasps rippled through the boutique. Guests leaned closer, whispering to one another. Did that just happen? She actually shut them out. A man near the watch display lifted his phone higher and said into his stream, This is not just a story. We are watching real power unfold right now. Elena stood near the counter, her hands pressed to her mouth. Relief and awe mingled on her face. She whispered, barely audible, She really is the owner. The woman in the navy cardigan did not raise her voice, but every word she spoke carried weight. You tried to erase me. You called me a fraud in my own store. But now the truth is here, and the truth does not vanish with a torn receipt. The manager's hands trembled on the counter. He tried to find his voice, but when it came, it was a whisper drowned by fear. This is a mistake. The system is wrong. The woman stepped closer, her eyes unyielding. The system does not lie. You do. And today, your lies are finished. The associate backed away, tears welling in her eyes, her earlier cruelty now exposed as cowardice. The guards stood apart, no longer defenders of the store, but silent witnesses to justice unfolding. The shoppers broke into applause again, louder this time, their clapping a verdict more powerful than any court. Phones caught every second, each recording a shard of truth that would spread far beyond these walls. The manager lowered his head, shoulders shaking with the realization that his authority, his arrogance, and his prejudice had all been stripped in an instant. He was no longer the judge. He was the condemned. And in the center of it all, the woman stood steady, her silence as commanding as her words. For the first time, the boutique was no longer a place of humiliation. It was a stage for justice, and the crowd had already chosen which side they stood on. The boutique was no longer quiet. Applause mixed with whispers, a low thunder rolling through the room. Every shopper's phone was raised, every lens fixed on the downfall unraveling before them. The woman in the navy cardigan did not move quickly, but her presence commanded the space like a verdict delivered. The manager stood frozen behind the counter, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge for support. His badge blinked red again, each flash reminding him that his authority had ended. He whispered to himself, "This cannot be happening." But it was, and the entire room bore witness. The associate tried to speak, her voice cracking under the weight of silence. She tricked the system. She hacked it somehow. But her protest fell flat. A guest near the handbags shouted back, "Stop lying! We all saw it. You tried to humiliate her, and now you are caught." Oh. Elena stepped forward, no longer trembling. Her voice was steady now, clear enough for everyone to hear. "She told the truth. She is the owner. And you tried to destroy her in her own house." The manager turned to her, eyes wide with desperation. "You do not understand. This store, this brand, it is my responsibility." The woman cut him off, her voice calm but sharp as steel. "Your responsibility was respect. Your duty was dignity. You failed at both." Gasps followed her words. They were not shouted, yet they carried heavier than any scream. The shoppers clapped again, some cheering outright. One woman near the jewelry cases wiped tears from her eyes. "Finally, justice," she whispered. The taller guard took a slow step back, then another, before finally lowering his head. "I am sorry," he muttered. "I should not have touched you." The smaller guard nodded in agreement, shame carved into his expression. The associate shrank into herself, avoiding every gaze, her earlier arrogance dissolving into silence. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, but she did not dare reach for it. The manager was unraveling, his face pale, his words reduced to fragments. "Please, I did not know. I thought," but excuses no longer mattered. The truth stood in front of him, undeniable and absolute. The woman raised her phone again. Her voice was quiet but final. "Confirm removal." "Oh." Her assistant's voice echoed through the line. "Confirmed. Gregory Vance, terminated. Access permanently revoked. Legal audit initiated." The crowd erupted into cheers this time, not just clapping but a roar of approval. Some filmed the manager's face as he realized the end of his career had arrived in the very lobby he once ruled with cruelty. And in that moment, every guest in the room understood. The balance of power had shifted forever. The woman they had seen humiliated minutes earlier was not just a customer. She was the force that no prejudice could silence. The sound of the crowd swelled until it filled every corner of the boutique. Phones captured every angle, every reaction, every fragment of justice unfolding in real time. The woman in the navy cardigan remained still, her calm composure contrasting sharply with the chaos unraveling around the staff who had tried to break her. The manager's access badge flashed red one final time before going dark. His shoulders slumped. The authority he once carried with arrogance was gone. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Only silence. The associate trembled, clutching the edge of the counter for balance. Her screen displayed the same word as his, terminated. Tears welled in her eyes, but they did not erase the memory of her insults, her cruelty, her eagerness to strip dignity from another human being. The taller guard lowered his head and walked toward the exit without waiting for orders. The smaller guard followed slowly, shame written in every step. Their departure was silent, but the message was clear. They no longer belonged here. Guests applauded again, louder this time, their voices rising in unity. Some clapped, some shouted, some cried. A mother held her daughter close and whispered, "Remember this. Remember what happens when you stand tall." Elena stood just behind the woman, her hands trembling not with fear but with pride. She had spoken the truth, and the truth had won. The woman's phone chimed once more. Her assistant's voice returned, calm and certain. All staff privileges rescinded, incident logged, legal and corporate follow-up scheduled. The woman lifted her gaze across the boutique, sweeping from face to face. She did not need to raise her voice. Justice is not loud, it is precise. And today, it is final. The room erupted once more, not with panic or cruelty, but with relief, awe, and the undeniable sense that something greater had taken place than just a firing. The store no longer carried the weight of humiliation. It carried the mark of transformation.